From the outside, Dakota Johnson was born into a fantasy. Movie star parents, a Hitchcock legend for a grandmother, fame written into her DNA. From the inside, it looked less like a fairy tale and more like a gilded cage, built from other people's trauma, other people's addictions, and other people's broken deals with power. Before she ever chose a role, the world had already decided what she was. A Nepo baby, a future ingenue, another Johnson Griffith face who would smile prettily while Hollywood did to her what it had done to the women before her. What nobody saw from the outside was that Dakota Johnson grew up studying that cage. She walked its perimeter. She mapped every bar. She listened carefully to the rattling ghosts inside it. And by the time she stepped into the spotlight herself, she had already started planning something very few people in her position ever attempt. Not how to get famous, but how to get free. The proof of that plan glows in one very specific room, on one very specific night. January 2022. Park City, Utah. Outside, the snow has turned Main Street into a postcard. Inside the Eccles Theater, the air is thin and unforgiving. This is Sundance, the festival that turns on sincerity and eats hype for breakfast. It is not impressed by lineage. It does not care whose child anyone is. The only thing that matters inside these walls is whether the story on the screen feels true. On stage, after the credits of a small film called Cha-Cha Real Smooth finish rolling, Dakota Johnson stands facing an audience of programmers, critics, buyers, and filmmakers who have seen everything. Her name, for once, is not on a gigantic studio backdrop. There are no gray silk ties, no red room, no promotional hashtag for a billion-dollar franchise. She is here as the lead actress and as a producer, the quiet architect who took a messy PDF from a young unknown named Cooper Raiff and decided it deserved a life. The applause starts light, almost polite. Then it grows. Something softens in the room, then breaks. People stand. The Eccles, one of the hardest rooms in the industry, gives her a full, sustained standing ovation. No one is screaming for selfies. No one is shouting Anastasia. They are applauding the film, and by extension, the woman who put her weight behind it, for a long, crystalline moment. Dakota Johnson is not anyone's daughter, not anyone's scandal, not anyone's punchline. She is simply a filmmaker whose judgment has just been publicly vindicated. To reach that stage, in that mood, required something rarer than overnight success. It required a lifetime of watching other people be destroyed by the thing she was born into. A calculated decision to walk straight into the center of the storm, and the discipline to turn the fame she didn't fully want into the exact kind of power she needed to understand how she got from the gilded cage to the Eccles Theater. The story has to reverse. It has to go back to the ghosts. Dakota Mai Johnson's life does not begin with her own choices. It begins in the long shadows of three people whose names were famous long before hers. The first shadow belongs to a woman the world remembers in a pale green suit with birds swarming around her head. Tippi Hedren, her grandmother. To Hollywood, Tippi is a Hitchcock blonde, the star of The Birds and Marnie, frozen forever in publicity stills, eternally calm beneath chaos. Inside the family, she is something else, a survivor of one of the industry's most notorious private tyrannies. Dakota meets that history not through press clippings but through visits to Shambhala, the big cat preserve her grandmother built in the California desert. Childhood for her is not just backyards and swimming pools. It is long drives out past the city, into heat and dust, until the car pulls up beside high fences and hand-painted signs warning about lions and tigers. In one remembered fragment, a small, dark-haired girl stands with her fingers hooked through chain link, watching a Bengal tiger move along the perimeter of its enclosure. The animal's coat catches the sun. Its paws land silently in the sand. When it roars, the sound passes straight through her chest and leaves her breathless. Adults tell her it is fine, that these animals are safe, that her grandmother knows exactly what she is doing. Even as a child, she can feel the contradiction. These are predators, made for wildness, contained only because one woman decided she would live among them and accept the danger. Later, when she learns the stories behind that decision about Alfred Hitchcock's obsession, about the controlling contracts, the harassment on set, the career that stalled the moment Tippy refused his advances, the metaphor snaps into focus. Shambhala is not just a sanctuary for animals. It is the physical proof of a vow. Never again will a man behind a camera have that kind of power over her. From Tippy, Dakota inherits a cold, clear lesson. The camera is not neutral, and power in Hollywood almost never belongs to the woman whose face is on the poster. The second ghost is Don Johnson, her father, the man who turned pastel suits and sockless loafers into a global uniform. On the set of Miami Vice, he is the center of his own weather system. Crew members orbit him. Producers worry about him. Magazines print his face when they want to explain a decade. To television audiences, he is the swaggering cop with the boat, the gun, the permanently squinting gaze. To a little girl sitting on a director's chair in the corner, he is something else again. She watches him between takes, how he flips a switch the moment the camera rolls. The voice drops. The body settles into a pose. The charisma detonates on cue. She also watches the other parts, the late-night phone calls, the absences, the whispered conversations about rehab and relapses, the way adults' voices change when they say his name and think she is not listening. The lesson here is different but related. Charisma is not stability, and the man everyone wants a piece of can be the man who cannot fully show up for his own life. From Dawn, Dakota learns to read rooms carefully. She learns that charm can be a mask, and that adoration from strangers does not guarantee safety at home. She learns, instinctively, to scan the emotional weather before she speaks. The third presence is Melanie Griffith, the person Dakota studies most closely, because Melanie's body is where the industry's violence is most visible. To audiences, Melanie is the sexy, slightly frazzled heroine of Working Girl, and the woman whose life tabloids cannot leave alone. To Dakota, she is simply Mom, the person whose dressing room door is always open, whose lap is always available when film sets get overwhelming. In the bright, humming intimacy of a makeup trailer, Dakota watches her mother disappear and reappear again and again. Bare-faced Melanie sits down in front of the mirror, tired, human, beautiful in the particular way mothers are to their children. Then brushes start to move. Foundation flattens her skin into a uniform canvas. Contour carves new angles into her cheeks. Liner extends her eyes. Lipstick reshapes her mouth, piece by piece. The woman in the chair becomes someone the outside world will recognize as Melanie Griffith. On the way to set, the same face that was just constructed in private is assaulted in public. Flashbulbs erupt as soon as the trailer door opens. Somewhere, a photographer will catch a frame where the concealer has creased, or the light is cruel, or the expression is unguarded. And that will be the image that sells papers. Every line, every pound, every rumor of surgery or relapse becomes fodder. Beauty, Dakota understands very early, is not simply admired, it is audited. Womanhood, in this world, is an ongoing performance evaluated by strangers. From Melanie, she absorbs another rule. If your body is your profession, everyone will feel entitled to an opinion about it. And very few of those opinions will be kind. 3 elders, 3 different kinds of captivity. A grandmother, whose refusal to submit cost her a mainstream career, A father whose good looks and magnetism spiraled into addiction. A mother whose face became a public battleground. Together they form a blueprint of everything Dakota does not want and everything she cannot fully avoid. The simplest way to escape would be to refuse the business entirely. She does not. She steps towards it, eyes open, teeth gritted, determined to do it differently. Her first steps look, from the outside, almost ordinary. There is modeling work, magazine spreads, a glossy Teen Vogue cover, fashion campaigns that lean into her sleepy eyes and bohemian posture. The industry slots her neatly into a pre-written role, the cool girl of Hollywood royalty, barefoot in designer dresses, someone who appears in mood boards more than in movies. It would have been easy to stay there, to let her life be a slow drift through red carpets and front rows. But surface has never interested her for long. What does interest her is what happens a few doors down the hall. In small casting rooms with bad coffee and fluorescent lighting, she starts going to auditions that no one can hand to her as a favor. Some she gets, most she doesn't. Her last name might help get her in the door. It does not change the fact that 10 other women have been in the chair before her, reading the same 3 lines. The first real jolt of recognition comes not from a starring role, but from a few minutes in a film about something completely different. In David Fincher's The Social Network, she plays a Stanford student who spends the night with Sean Parker, the slick Napster founder, embodied by Justin Timberlake. On the page, her part is almost nothing, the pretty girl in the wrong billionaire's bed. On screen, she quietly rearranges the scene. She plays the character as someone who has already seen men like this, who is amused and faintly unimpressed by Parker's manic brilliance. When she looks at him, it is with the kind of amused distance that Dakota herself will later bring to talk shows. You think you are the center of this story. I am not so sure. That small, exact choice registers. Casting directors remember. Directors note that she can do more than fill space in the frame. She can create a slightly different story simply by refusing to play a stereotype straight. In quick succession come roles in Vanked and Jump Street, in odd little indies like Goats, in TV projects that flicker and vanish. To the casual viewer, she is that girl from that thing. To people paying closer attention, she is an actress who keeps finding ways to be present on screen without overreaching. The publicity machine, as always, tries to write its own script over the top. Profiles label her Hollywood royalty and the new it girl. Stylists build a brand out of her fondness for big coats and loose shirts and quietly expensive boots. Late-night shows invite her on to play the game of charming anecdotes and pre-approved talking points. This is the phase when many young actresses either surrender fully to the persona the industry wants or burn out trying to fight it. Dakota does something more subtle. She sits in the chairs, wears the clothes, does the press. But in interviews, she consistently refuses to give the performance the format expects. She leaves silences where she is supposed to giggle. She answers intrusive questions with blunt honesty, or a look that makes the question sound more foolish than any answer could. Her humor is dry, almost allergic to enthusiasm. She gives just enough to do her job and no more. Underneath, the observer, the child at Shambhala and on the Miami Vice set, has always remains firmly in control. It is this version of Dakota Johnson, famous enough to be recognizable, not yet defined by a single role, sharper than the publicity around her, that walks into the audition that will change everything. By the early 2010 seconds, E.L. James's 50 Shades of Grey trilogy is a phenomenon. The books sell in the tens of millions. Fans trade dog-eared copies and fan art. Moral panics rage about what the series is doing to romance, to sex, to feminism. The film adaptation is inevitable and terrifying. Everyone in the business understands the stakes. Whoever plays Anastasia Steele will become instantly, globally famous. She will also be attached, probably forever, to a story most critics already despise. For Dakota, the choice is not simple. She knows exactly what it means to have the wrong project attach itself to a family name. She has watched how a single narrative, Hitchcock's Blonde, working girl sex symbol, Miami Vice playboy, can smother all the nuance of a life. Signing on would mean handing strangers a shorthand for her that might be impossible to shake. And yet, there is also the cold arithmetic of opportunity. A lead role of this magnitude would give her something she does not yet have. Leverage, the kind of leverage that buys time between projects, that funds riskier choices, that gets her meetings not just as an actress, but as a potential producer. If she can survive it, she walks into the audition and makes a decision that tells the producers and herself exactly how she intends to survive. Instead of starting with the film's own lines, she delivers a monologue from Ingmar Bergman's persona, a dense, unsettling film about identity and performance. It is an almost absurdly serious choice for what many in Hollywood consider glorified fan fiction. But that is the point. She is announcing, before any contract is signed, that she will approach the role as a real character, not a punchline, that she has a mind shaped by European art cinema as much as by studio franchises. They cast her. The deal she signs is, in its own way, a Faustian bargain, in exchange for her 20s, for her image, for 3 films worth of physical exposure and emotional labor. She will receive global name recognition, financial security, and a seat at tables that might otherwise stay closed. It is a bet that she can endure being seen as Anastasia long enough to outgrow her. The reality on set is a long way from the breathless fantasies baked into the marketing. The production in Vancouver is a careful, expensive, anxious machine. The most intense emotions are not happening in front of the camera between Dakota and Jamie Dornan, but behind it, between director Sam Taylor Johnson and E.L. James. Taylor Johnson wants to make a film with texture and irony, to give Anastasia flashes of agency and humor, to push the material somewhere stranger and more interesting. James wants a literal translation of the book that made her rich, down to specific lines and beats. Dakota becomes the hinge between these two incompatible visions. In the morning, she and Taylor Johnson might find a way to turn a clumsy line into something sly, to let Anastasia enjoy a moment of power. In the afternoon, James may insist that the original wording be restored, that a subversive take be replaced with wide-eyed earnestness. On some days, the character she is playing feels like a woman figuring out her own desires. On others, she feels like a paper doll being moved through a preordained fantasy. The sex scenes, which the culture obsesses over, are the least sensual part of the process. They are technical exercises, modesty garments taped in place, camera angles planned to the inch, intimacy coordinators watching every movement, crews of mostly clothed people standing just out of frame. Vulnerability is scheduled. From this time to that time, she will simulate orgasm under hot lights, and then get up, put on a bathrobe, and answer questions about it at a press conference. The actual discomfort is less about being naked and more about surrendering control over how that nakedness will be edited, framed, replayed. When the first film finally opens in 2015, it does exactly what the studio wanted it to do. It detonates, box office records fall. The franchise proves bulletproof to scorn. On the Berlin premiere, red carpet, Dakota is hit by a wall of sound and light that makes even someone raised on film sets feel displaced from her own body. Fans scream her name, some as adoration, some as projection. They are calling not just for her, but for a character they have spent years imagining. For millions of people, she is now the physical embodiment of their private reading. Critics, meanwhile, sharpen their knives. Reviews range from lukewarm to savage. Late-night hosts use the film as a running joke. Essays dissect its sexual politics, mostly without bothering to distinguish between character and actress. Some note that Dakota gives a surprisingly nimble, funny performance inside stiff material. Most never get that far. In the shorthand of the culture, 50 Shades quickly becomes synonymous with trash, and Dakota's name is fused to the phrase. This is the paradox she must live inside for the next several years. She is more visible and more financially secure than she has ever been, and at the same time less respected by the people whose opinion she actually values. The bargain she made is working exactly as designed. It does not feel like winning. The machine, however, is not interested in her ambivalence. Sequels are already scheduled. Sam Taylor Johnson, bruised and exhausted, exits. James Foley steps in, a seasoned director brought in to keep the train on the tracks, not to reinvent it. 50 Shades Darker and 50 Shades Freed are shot back to back, a long, grinding marathon of familiar sets, familiar beats, familiar arguments on the internet. For Dakota, the repetition is its own kind of pressure. While her peers scatter across genres and styles, she spends her mid-20s returning again and again to the same penthouse, the same contract, the same red room props, trying to find new shades of feeling and material designed for comfort, not surprise. She shows up every day, knows her lines, hits her marks. The professionalism she learned, watching her elders, the curtain goes up, and you deliver. Whatever is happening in your life becomes a kind of armor. The work may not be nourishing, but she will not let herself be sloppy inside it. Each release follows the template of the first. Money poured in, money cascades back out, critical derision bubbles up, online jokes multiply. Through it all, Dakota develops a harder, more exact sense of what she wants the rest of her career to be, and what she will need to do to get it. The contract is finite. The label, Anastasia Steele, does not have to be. The day her obligation ends is, outwardly, mundane. On the last day of shooting the third film, the assistant director calls, "That's a wrap on Dakota," and the set responds with applause. There are speeches, hugs, a cake shaped like something from the films. People take photos they will post with nostalgic captions years later. But for her, under the ritual, there is a private, almost physical sensation of a door unlocking. She has paid the price. For the first time since signing on, she is free to say no. She does not waste the window, even before the franchise is fully finished. She has already begun sending up flares that signal where she intends to go. One of the brightest is A Bigger Splash, directed by Luca Guadagnino, shot on the volcanic island of Pantelleria. The film is a humid, morally murky chamber piece about desire and self-deception. Dakota's character, Penelope, is the teenage daughter of Ralph Fiennes' bombastic music producer, and she arrives on the island like a lit match. Where Anastasia is written as inexperienced and reactive, Penelope is calculating. She moves through scenes with the casual confidence of someone who knows exactly what effect her presence has on older men and chooses, sometimes with boredom and sometimes with malice, to provoke them. Dakota plays her with a cool, unsettling stillness. The performance is not about sexiness so much as about danger. It is a direct rebuttal to anyone who thought she could only play shy. With Guadagnino, she finds something she has been missing, a set where the director cares less about box office quadrants and more about the texture of a look, the exact weight of a pause. She is not being asked to carry a franchise. She is being invited into a collaboration. It feels like going back to the version of acting she fell in love with. watching old films in her grandmother's house, only this time she is inside it. Their next collaboration, Suspiria, strips away any lingering suspicion that Dakota Johnson is interested in playing it safe. The remake of Dario Argento's cult horror classic is not designed to be liked in the broad sense. It is long, cold, and saturated with dread. To prepare for the role of Susie Bannion, an American drawn into a Berlin dance academy run by witches, Dakota trains in dance for 2 years. No glamour choreography here. The movements she learns are brutal, angular, designed to look almost painful. The shoot takes place in an old, echoing building that has its own unsettling atmosphere. The story explores complicity, fascism, maternal power, the thin line between nurture and consumption. In the film's most infamous sequence, Susie performs a wildly physical piece in one room, while, elsewhere in the academy, another dancer's body is contorted and snapped in time with her movements. The scene is almost unbearable to watch. For Dakota, performing it is an act of surrender to the idea that art can disturb as well as console. When she later admits that making the film affected her so deeply she needed therapy, it does not sound like embellishment. It sounds like the endpoint of a personal exorcism. She has taken the image the world fixated on her body in pain, naked, controlled by a man's fantasy, and re-weaponized it in service of a story where the power ultimately belongs to the women. Around these extremes, she chooses roles that further complicate her image. In The Peanut Butter Falcon, she is a weary, kind social worker whose patience has frayed from working inside a broken care system. The performance is grounded, small, warm without sentimentality. In The Lost Daughter, under Maggie Gyllenhaal's direction, she is Nina, a young mother whose glossy surface cannot quite hide the desperation underneath. Against Olivia Colman's older, equally conflicted character, she becomes a mirror of future choices and regrets. Taken together, these roles form a quiet manifesto. Dakota Johnson is not here to be anybody's fantasy figure. She is here to inhabit women who are contradictory, compromised, sometimes unlikable, always human. It is a deliberate counterweight to the franchise that tried to reduce her to one function. While she is doing this work on screen, she is also refining another, stranger kind of performance, the one that takes place in talk show chairs and internet clips. In an era where celebrities are expected to share, confess, overshare, and brand themselves as relatable, she cultivates a public persona that is both open and opaque. Her 2019 appearance on The Ellen DeGeneres Show becomes a textbook example when Ellen accuses her, playfully but pointedly, of not inviting her to her birthday party. The script demands that Dakota laugh, apologize, and allow the host to control the narrative. Instead, she looks Ellen in the eye and says calmly, "Actually, no, that's not the truth, Ellen." The audience laughs in surprise. The clip travels around the world. In 6 words, she has done on live television what she has been doing, quietly, for years, refused to let someone else's story overwrite hers. The now famous Architectural Digest tour of her Los Angeles home functions similarly. She wanders through rooms filled with green velvet sofas, hardwood floors, and many plants, speaking in that slightly hesitant, amused tone that makes it unclear how seriously she takes the whole exercise. When she gestures to a bowl piled high with limes and announces cheerfully that she loves them, the internet seizes on it. Memes about Dakota Johnson and her limes proliferate. Months later she mentions, almost as an aside, that she is allergic to limes and that the bowl was a stylist's idea. Suddenly, the entire video reads differently, not as an intimate peek into her real life, but as a staged fantasy that she is in on. These moments are minor in the scale of a career, but they matter because they show how thoroughly she understands the grammar of modern fame. If everything is content, then the only defense is to treat even the smallest interactions as scenes you can shape, correct the host when she lies, tell a harmless untruth about fruit to expose the artificiality of the format, laugh at the right time, withhold at the right time, reveal only what you can afford to lose. The one area where she refuses to perform at all is the one that, in a previous generation, might have been her most marketable asset, her romantic life. Her relationship with Chris Martin could easily have become a brand in itself. Instead, it exists mostly off-camera. They are occasionally photographed together. They do not talk about each other in interviews. There are no joint magazine covers, no elaborate social media reveals. For a woman whose childhood memories include her parents' heartbreaks being splashed across tabloids, this is not a coincidence. It is a boundary drawn with surgical precision. That instinct to control the frame, rather than be defined by it, leads naturally to the next step. After years of being at the mercy of other people's decisions, Dakota Johnson founds a production company, Tea Time Pictures, with her friend and collaborator Ro Donnelly. The move is not a vanity project. It is the logical endpoint of everything she has learned. Watching her grandmother's career be derailed, her mother's image be consumed, and her own blockbuster years be micromanaged by distant executives. Tea Time's unofficial mission is to support the kind of stories that rarely survive studio development, intimate, odd, emotionally specific films that would once have been called small as a coded way of saying they were too risky. With Tea Time behind her, Dakota is no longer just an employee. She is a stakeholder. She can take a script she loves and help will it into being. She can attach herself as a producer and offer directors protection she never had at the beginning of her own career. Cha-Cha Real Smooth is the clearest demonstration of what that power looks like when it works. Cooper Raif's script is tender and awkward and very easy to underestimate. It does not come with existing IP, a built-in fan base, or an obvious marketing hook. What it does have is emotional truth. Dakota reads it, and instead of waiting for someone else to take a chance, she chooses to be the someone else. She signs on to star as Domino, a young mother with a complex inner life, and to produce at Sundance. When the Eccles Theater stands for the film, it is not just applauding Raif's charm or the sweetness of the story. It is applauding the entire chain of decisions that brought the film to that screen. The actress who used a much-mocked franchise to buy herself financial independence. The producer who leveraged her name to get a tiny film noticed. The woman who has spent her entire life learning how to move within the system without letting it swallow her. The record-breaking sale of the film to Apple TV plus $15 million, a huge sum for such a modest project, is a footnote compared to that feeling. Money matters, validation matters, but what matters most, in terms of narrative, is this. Dakota Johnson has successfully walked the full length of the arc, from child of Hollywood to commodity to author. Her legacy, still unfolding, is complicated. On the one hand, it is an almost perfect case study in how to use privilege intelligently. She starts several steps inside the gates. She has access to information, to mentors, to the blunt cautionary tales of her own family history. When the crossroads comes, she has the freedom to take the risky route, signing on to 50 Shades, knowing exactly how ugly the discourse will be, and the resources to ride out the worst of it. When Tea Time needs early support, her surname helps open doors. On the other hand, she turns that starting position into something more than self-preservation. She does not disappear into a life of safe prestige projects. She chooses difficult roles, disturbing films, directors who ask more of her than showing up and looking beautiful. She uses her talk show moments not just to be charming, but to puncture hypocrisy. She builds a wall around her private life, not because she is indifferent to others, but because she has witnessed At point blank, what happens when that wall is missing? It is tempting, in an individualist culture, to treat this as proof that the system can work if you are simply smart and tough enough. Dakota Johnson's story resists that neat conclusion. For every one actress who can afford to treat a billion-dollar franchise as a Trojan horse, there are dozens who cannot find the exit once they are inside. For every woman who has the leverage to found a production company, there are countless others who will always be waiting for someone else to approve their ideas. So the questions her life poses are double-edged. On one level, how does a woman escape a prison built out of fame, sex, and shadows she never chose? Her answer is clear. She studies the walls, she looks at the ghosts, she makes a ruthless bargain on her own terms. She walks through the gate, in a role the world mocks her for. Then she takes the money, the attention, the derision, and she turns them into autonomy. On another level, the harder level, her story asks this: what kind of system demands that bargain in the first place? What does it say about the machinery of modern celebrity that the smartest thing a woman born into it can do is weaponize its ugliest offer and hope she is strong enough to survive the plan? From the outside, Dakota Johnson still looks, to a casual observer, like someone whose life just worked out. She is beautiful, successful, in demand. She produces her own films. She lives in a sunlit house with too many plants. She appears on talk shows and makes hosts uncomfortable in ways that feel satisfying to watch. The cage, if it is still there, is invisible. From the inside, the architecture is more visible. She knows exactly how fragile it all is. She knows how quickly a lazy narrative can calcify into something that follows you for decades. She has watched it happen to people she loves. That knowledge is what drives the precision of her choices and the careful distance she maintains between what she gives and what she keeps. Maybe, in the end, that distance is her real art form. It is easy to see the performances captured on film, harder to see the constant, ongoing performance of a woman insisting, softly but relentlessly, on being the one who tells her own story. The standing ovation at Sundance is just the loudest echo of that work. The lights in the Eccles eventually dim. The snow outside melts. The discourse moves on to the next festival, the next scandal, the next Nepo baby debate. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Dakota Johnson reads a new script, or walks onto a set, or closes her front door on a day when she does not have to be anyone's content at all. The machine that shaped her childhood and tried to claim her 20s is still humming. It will swallow other names, other faces. The question she leaves hanging, for anyone watching closely, is not whether she won. It is whether the path she carved through inherited ghosts, through a franchise everyone loved to hate, through talk shows and art films, and finally into her own production office, is a singular escape act, or a blueprint. If it is only possible for someone with her surname, then it is a thrilling story and a damning indictment at the same time. If fame is a cage that sometimes looks like a gift, Dakota Johnson has at least proved one thing. It is possible, with enough clarity and enough stubbornness, to use the bars as rungs and climb out. Whether the industry that built the cage will ever stop calling that a happy ending is another question entirely.